All good.
Perfect. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. And here we go. All right, everybody, welcome to our roundtable. We're so glad that you are here. We're going to be discussing a topic that has got a lot of people asking questions. But first, I want to introduce our stakeholders, our panel of experts, if you will, that have been part of this process and that are with us today. We have, first and foremost, we have Ann Lagasse. Anne is an auditor with Brantner, Thibodeau and Associates, and also has 20 plus years of experience as a business manager. So she worked a long time in the field and probably has connections with many of you as well. We have Chris Line, who's Director of Software Engineering for Link, which is the software, those are from the software people who made the Grants for Me platform. Linda Stachera is senior consultant with Link. I'm not sure if Linda is here with us today, but she has been a big part of the development of our platform and works closely with Chris Line. Colin Welsh, who is not here today, he is the president of Maine ASBO, but he has been working with us to help get this coordinated as well. Denise Towers, she's the regionalization and compliance person in school finance at the Maine DOE. Cheryl Lang, our ESCA Federal Programs Director. Myself, I'm the Management Analyst on the ESCA team. Today we have Daniel Weeks with us, who is the Title 3 and 5 Coordinator, Jessica Karen, who's Title 1 Coordinator, and Rita Pillow, who is a Title 1 Coordinator as well. So as you can see, it took quite a few people to put this together, just further supports our efforts to make this a more collaborative effort and to keep us all working together because we're all working towards a common goal. All right, so our topics for today are transferred monies. So that's the primary part, the proportionate breakdown of the payments of those transferred monies, and how you maintain your books and your ledgers. So title transfers. Districts have an option to transfer monies from one title to another. So for example, they can transfer Title II monies into Title I or Title IV monies into Title II. Transfers are no longer invoiced separately within the new system, unlike in GEMS where you would do those completely separate. And you may have more than one title transferring into another. So you may have Title II and Title IV funds going into Title I. So these are all parts to think about. So one of the major pieces that has brought us here today is the proportional breakdown of the payments of invoices that are submitted. So Dan actually helped me put this together. It's sort of a breakdown, just a general example of what the proportion breakdown would look like. And this is really, whoops, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. This really pertains to FY22 and moving forward, though 21 kind of has pieces of this. Since we began our invoicing in GEMS, we had already started invoicing those for those transferred funds, and many districts would have invoiced their transferred funds before they even touched just their general title funds. So because we went through that process and because you've already kind of drawn down those transferred funds, that proportionality is a little different for FY21. So it's a little harder to predict what that proportionality will be. In FY22, that's different because really it just comes down to essentially a piece of the pie, right? So if you have a Title I allocation of $100,000 and you're transferring in 50,000 of that, then you're just basically looking at what the proportion of that total amount is made out of the transferred funds, and that determines your proportionality. So we kind of give an example here on if you were to invoice, right? if you had a 20,000 would be a sixth of the total of the 120, which would be about 16.67%. 100,000 is 5/6. So we're just talking fractions, really, pieces of the pie of the total of the 120, which would also be 83.33%. So the proportionate breakdown is actually pretty simple if you think about it in terms of what piece of pie, you know, what your pie is made out of. Another tool you have as well to know how much money you will be receiving, what that proportionate breakdown looks like prior to receiving your check, is that after you have submitted your invoice and I have approved it. So I've approved it and I've sent it to our accountants. At that time, you can click on what's called the payment details on the request page under invoices. So that's highlighted here. You'll see it right at the top. And when you click on that button, you're going to get a layout kind of similar to this. So this district has more than one title being transferred into Title I. So I figured this would be a nice little example to show. So it's showing you the breakdown of the payment. This is what you're going to expect to see. Another part of this is that you may have a different accountant in our DAS department who cover the different pieces, right? So you're going to have a Title I accountant, a Title II accountant, Title V. And recently they've been quite a bit understaffed, much like most places. And unfortunately, turnaround time for certain titles may take longer. So you may get your Title I check a few days before you receive the other checks. So hang tight, they're coming, and they should all equal your full request in the end. All right, and so these are just a few questions that we've received from the field about what to do with this money, with these transfers and their ledgers. And this is where Anne comes in. So we brought Anne in because she's an auditor, and she'll be able to shine some light, just a general light onto these specific questions. And like I said, if you have more nuanced questions, I suggest you speak to your auditor, take the information that you got from Anne and go to your auditor and ask about those more finer detailed questions. So Anne, I'm going to give it away and let you take over from here.
Okay, Christy, thanks. The first one about recording transfer funds, this is going to depend on what year of funding that you are billing. Up through the funding year 21, this is going to be billed in the old way, so to speak. So you would go in and toggle to the 2021 or 2020 if you're still working on those carryover funds, and invoice under the title, and there's another invoice you're going to have to create under the transfer title. So that what we've seen in our units have that pretty much down. The billing goes to the different titles, the transfer in titles. The revenue funds would come into those various other titles and be received as revenue. And then there's going to be a transfer general ledger account entry made to that title. Say Title IV is transferring to Title I. Title IV would have a transfer to Title I. Title I will have a transfer in to reciprocate that, and all of the expenses would be under the Title I. So only thing in Title IV or any of the other transfers, any of the other titles that you're transferring from would be the bill / the revenue coming in, and then the transfer to the other title. All the expenses would be in the title that is being transferred to. Christy, do you want me to go through all these real quick, or?
I unmute myself. Yeah, I think just to address these to start is a good base to any questions that might follow.
Okay, so the next one you have is, what do I do when checks come in at different times? This, I think, is more of an organizational thing. When you do a bill keep track of that bill. And then when they come in at different times, you would receive them into that revenue account, Title I or Title IV. Again, this all depends on which funding year you're looking at. In funding year 22, you're going to be receiving all the funds that come in into the title. For the example, I'm going to use Title I as the main title that everything's transferring to. So all the expenses are going to be in Title I. All the revenues would come into Title I. None of this receiving in other titles and transferring over. They'd all come into Title I. What I would suggest for organizational purposes only, and just in case purposes, is you may want to set up a different revenue code, similar but different, for each of those funds that come in. Funds that come in from Title IV, funds that come in from Title II would all be received in Title I, but you can set up a variant of your revenue code and then arrange so it rolls up into the general Title I revenue code for uploading to the state. That's kind of a more of an organizational thing. So I would suggest that would be a good thing to do. And then you could always, when you have an accounts receivable in front of you, you can obviously check off the parts that come in, and you'd know when to follow up on a part that didn't come in with the proper agency or your contact at the state. Is there a difference between how I keep my accounting under GEMS and how it should be in the new Grants for Me system? My understanding is that GEMS and the old part of the new system are similar in that you would be billing the different strands or titles individually. The new part, or the FY22 and forward part of the Grants for Me, is going to be the consolidated model, so to speak. So as far as accounting system and what we're looking for, it's going to depend on what, I keep saying this, but it's true, it's going to depend on the year that you're billing. So I guess in FY22, we're going to see a combination of revenues coming into the sending titles and then transferring into the receiving titles. And then for the FY22 codes, those would be coming into Title I. So in the example. So I have a question. So I lost the question. So if the revenue comes in identifying Title II or Title IV, you're saying we now put the money directly into Title I and we no longer need to transfer from one fund to the other in FY22. Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm also saying that I would, I tend to be uber organized. I would, in your Title I, just open up a couple of lines that do Title I, say Title I/Title IV, Title I/Title II. I'm hearing that you're not going to be needing to use that in any other way but to keep track of it, maybe keep track of it towards your accounts receivable. It's just an organizational thing. Another question. So we can also expend everything under Title I. For FY22 and beyond, you're going to want to spend everything out of your title that is being transferred to. So if you have three strands of funding from the other titles and they're transferring into Title I, all of your expenses are going to be in Title I. All of your billing is going to be in Title I. All of your revenue is going to be in Title I. Why can't we keep transferring it? Is if it is identified as money from another title, it all washes in the end. There's no reason why you can't. It just, in my experience, it's been difficult for some districts to grasp that whole receiving and then transferring over to the main title. So if you want to keep doing it that way, we're not going to be. When we do the total at the end of the year that you spent under titles, we're going to be grouping it all into that Title I anyway. So it's a little bit, yes, the short answer is yes, you can keep doing it that way. It just seems easier to me and as an auditor and potentially as a business manager to keep it all under that separate, under that receiving title, when you are able to do that in FY22 or for the 22 appropriation. I hope I was clear there. How does this process look within different accounting systems? My experience is with ProFund, so I really can't speak to any of the different accounting systems. You'd have to look towards your contacts within those systems. In ProFund, there is a module called Grant Tracker, and that's been especially helpful for some units to use with these things because it allows you to basically use the same set of accounts for the same grant year and maintain the projects that are planned and applied for under that year over several fiscal years. So that is not something I'm greatly familiar with, but I know that some districts do it that way. And it seems to work for them as long as you're using the correct fund codes in those grant tracker modules. Any other questions about what I have just covered? I guess it's back to you, Christy.
Okay, so at this point, anybody who has some burning questions that they'd like to ask, go ahead and throw that right in the chat. This is less of a sit and get and more of a discussion. So we want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your questions. We are going to be putting out a kind of a Q&A following this as a guide for you as well. So the more we have to put in there, the better. So I'm going to leave it open for a little bit here for everyone to ask their questions. And if you're all quiet, I'm going to be like, listen, we've heard a lot from the field, so I'm expecting some feedback here. So I'm putting you guys on the spot. And thank you so much for providing clarity and being here today. Oh, it looks like Lucy's added some. Perfect. Awesome, you guys. Thank you.
Trying to get up to that first one. Just to be clear, let's see. Just to be clear, both of my districts transfer everything to our school-wide program. I will no longer need to know that I've spent all of my Title II and IV funds separately from Title I. If you have Title II projects that are Title IV projects that are not transferring money or that are staying or that some is staying in Title II and Title IV, yes, those are going to have to be separate. So Title II, if Title II is 40,000, 20 of that is going into Title I, then you do have 20,000 in Title II that will be separate, remaining in Title II, and that will be reported and billed separately. Same with Title IV. So the only thing I'm talking about as far as consolidation is going to be for grant years 22 and forward, and the transfers that occur from titles to titles. The receiving titles can be reported together as that receiving title instead of being broken out to the components. Okay, this one is for you guys, I guess, at the state.
Yeah.
System prorating reimbursement. Okay, go ahead with that.
And Chris, this might be one. Why is the system prorating the reimbursement requests? If we were transferring all of our Title IV into Title I, it was easier to fully expend reimburse the Title IV before starting to use the Title I funds.
I can try to answer that at a high level. Thank you, Christy. So one of the things that you'll notice is a difference from 21 to 22 is that in 21, I think you actually budgeted separate line items for the transfers into a grant, whereas in 22 and forward, you don't have those separate budget lines for the transferred funds. So in your case, in your question, you're moving Title IV to Title I, but you could also just as easily have a scenario where I'm moving Title IV and Title II and maybe some other grants around. in that case, it would just arbitrarily decide if it was Title II or Title IV. So kind of an amalgam of a number of the states that we worked with around the country. It was deemed that doing a prorating of the payments based on like the proportion of the allocation was a kind of a logical approach, and one that, you know, by the end of the year, it would have kind of played itself out anyways. I guess that's the short answer to that, or the longer answer than you wanted.
All right, Paula Pooler. Thank you, Chris. Paula Pooler, Grant Tracker is my favorite module in ProFund. Paula, I don't know if you'd like to share maybe a little bit of your experience with that, because I know Anne's touched upon it, but maybe a little more insight from a user perspective would be really helpful.
Hi.
Yes. Hi, Paula.
So for me in Grant Tracker, I set up everything in Grant Tracker that's outside of the 1,000 fund. And I do love it because I set up all my titles. And at the beginning of each year, I take my carry forward from the previous year, add in my new allocation, and add in all my transfers. And I set up one budget for Title 1A, so I know what my grand total is. So I don't ever transfer money in when I'm requesting from Title I, for instance, and it includes the big dollar figure of all the other ones. I receive it right into Title I, but it's easy to keep track of when you're in Grant Tracker. That's been a lifesaver for me. So I hope that's okay, but I've never been questioned by the auditors, but I always just receive, even if it's a transfer from Title II, Title IV, whatever it is. And if I'm requesting it under Title I, that's where I'm putting the revenue, because my budget is set up for the grand total, which will balance to Grant Tracker and all of my reconciliation at the end of the year. And I do my Grant Tracker by setting it up and doing my projects within that'll match up to the projects that are in grants for me. So you always know exactly where you stand with that.
Awesome. Thank you for
I have
sharing
different
that.
questions, but we haven't hit them yet. But so I'll just be patient and wait for the other ones to come up.
Okay. Thank you. We have a question from Keith Morin. When we receive a reimbursement that is different than what we requested, are you encouraging us to keep a separate accounting document to keep track of our requests?
That would be, that would be something that you would need to decide. We as auditors are just advising people to be organized. We don't, I'm assuming this is for FY22 and beyond. This question is applied to that. I'm just saying that in my uber organized world, I prefer to put separate revenue accounts under that Title I, say, to just keep track of it. You're going to keep track of the receivables anyway. And if you don't receive part of your receivable, you build Title I and the state's going to send you 4 checks. If you don't receive the 1 check, you're going to know, you're going to follow up on that. If you receive different amounts that don't total up what your reimbursement is, you're going to want to follow up on that. So I'm just suggesting, I guess, an organizational way to keep track of those things. The state is telling me that they're not going to require these different titles that are transferred into Title I in the example to be reported out as anything other than Title I. So you can just receive them into Title I and be done with it. Or if you want to just be a just in case kind of procedure, then, you know, that would be a suggestion. You don't have to do it that way.
And if I could clarify my question,
Sure.
so with regard to transferred monies, it requires us to create a task and put a budget in that task for that project. So our accounting system, we've moved from ProFund because it is no longer supported, but we have a budget for a project. We are keeping track of how much money we're spending out of that project. We are requesting monies that are expended from that project. to the DOE. And we are faced with being reimbursed a proportion of that expense, which requires us to not only keep track of our budget in our fiscal management system, but it is now requiring us to keep track of what we are reimbursed based upon our request. So essentially, we have three different systems that we are attempting to keep track of: our own financial system, what we are requesting for reimbursement, and what we are receiving, which that could be coupled. However, when it comes to performance reporting time, the budgets that are reflected in our system and also the budgets that are reflected in the Grants for Me system are different. So it's becoming very cumbersome, I think, from our standpoint, in having to keep track of our requests, what we're being reimbursed, what's reflected for a budget that is left in the Grants for Me platform, as well as what we feel as though the budget should be in our own fiscal management system. So I'm just wondering if that is the intent of the DOE and Grants for Me.
That does sound confusing. That's complex. What system are you using, Keith? Just FYI for me.
Yeah, we've used ProFund, which Tyler has announced, I think for quite some time, that they're not supporting that and are going to be encouraging districts to move on to another platform. We have transitioned to IV, Infinite Visions.
Okay. I would still go back to what the DOE has been telling me, that FY22 is, from FY22 on, is going to be the combination of transfers into the single title. So if you have transfers from 4 and 2 into 1, you're only going to be reporting budgeting, expensing, receiving revenue, and reporting in Title 1. Yes, you're going to have a mixture of methods with with funding year 20 and funding year 21 if you still have carryover. But from 22 on, it will be a single stream, single reporting type of arrangement.
So what is the advice for those that have funds in 20 and 21 that are requesting funds that we are being reimbursed proportionally for, when in reality our expenses are not reflecting that amount? So if I have a project and I have $100 in it and I'm requesting reimbursement for 50, but I'm getting $30 of the 50 requested, at some point, I'm going to have to fill out a performance report that is going to be reflective of what we have recorded we spent, and then what the balance is showing in Grants for Me, which is different.
I think Christy probably would be able to explain that, because I'm not sure about 21 and 20 as far as proportionality. My understanding was you went into the Grants for Me and you would toggle to the 20 or the 21 tab and complete that invoicing procedure the same way you have up until now, not the GEM way, but via the separate titles that are transferring in. I don't understand why you would get, if you would bill for $50 or $100 and you get $30, it might be a timing issue, or it might be, I really can't speak to what the DOE would be thinking in that case. Do you have any idea, Christy?
Yeah, it is complex, Keith. I'm trying to wrap around all the elements that Dan, your hand's up. Dan to the rescue. Let's see what he has to say.
Good afternoon, Keith. So I think what I'm hearing is that if you have 21 funds and you've got a mixture of transfers, say into Title I, and you go to reimburse those, under the old system, you would submit separate reimbursements for the transferred funds than you would for the actual Title I funds, right? That was the old way of doing things, is that they would have to be two separate invoices, and not everybody invoiced those proportionally. Some people, like Christy had said at the beginning, that some people like to invoice all of their transferred fund first, or some people would, do their allocation funds first, and then they would have to invoice their transfers after. And so the amounts that were transferred when we moved from GEMS to Grants for Me wasn't the original proportions when they were originally set up in the 21 application. And so if someone had invoiced all of their transfers or most of their transfers, that proportion of transferred funds versus allocation funds would be very different than the original, pieces of the pie, so to speak. And so I think what you're seeing, Keith, is that because the invoices weren't made, they weren't submitted in GEMS proportionally, that the new system is pulling based on the percentage of what was left. So if you had, say, it's 5,000 transferred from Title II into Title I, and you've only got 1,000 left of it, that switches the proportional amount. And so that Title II proportion might actually be a lot smaller than what it used to be. Does that kind of make sense? And so when you get a Grants for Me invoice, you're actually getting a proportional amount based on what's left in each of the transfers and the allocation of that particular title. Did I say that right, Chris?
Yeah, it will attempt to proportionalize the 21 stuff if possible. But if it's been previously paid out in a way where those proportions aren't possible, it then has to dip into other sources to complete the payment.
And I think that's why, Keith, that payment details section. So once Christy has approved an invoice, you can go in and see what the payment details are actually going to be, and you can see, where those funds are coming from to make up that total invoice request. I think if you invoice for $10,000 and it gets approved, you're not going to get a check for $7,000. You'll get, you might get one check for $7,000, but you will get the other $3,000. It might come from another accountant, which might take a little bit longer. And so they might not come at the same time, but you will get your full $10,000 that you requested.
I'm hoping that the DOE acknowledges that this is yet again a difficulty on districts to keep track of whether it be proportionality or anything else, that, when it comes to performance reports, we're looking for accurate data to match Grants for Me balances as well as our financial records. And this is not an easy transition.
It's certainly heard, which is why we're having this discussion today, Keith. And we are very hopeful and can see a light at the end of the tunnel once we get past this 21 hurdle. Once we go into 22, it's a whole new ball game and it's much more simple. Unfortunately, the transition did happen mid-year, so we do have to deal with the fact that we had a different system at the start and now we have another system, and we completely acknowledge that that is a difficult transition, and it has been for everyone involved. But in the long run, I believe it's going to be it's going to be much more simplistic to understand, and so FY22 brings that light, and we may have to, just based on how you guys have decided to do your books, is that there may need to be a deeper dive in for you guys if this isn't going to provide enough clarity for you with your auditor, with us, with school finance, and it may have to be just a bigger discussion we have with you guys. All right. Terry, Gavin, do you want to just come on in and say your question, Terry?
Sure. Just wanted clarification. If we move money from Title 4 to Title 1, that money is now Title 1 money. If there's a carryover, no matter where the proportions are coming from, it's a Title 1 carryover. Am I correct?
Yes.
So our performance report and everything will be based on all of that being Title 1 money.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. It looks like someone was giving some feedback to Keith, perhaps. I have the name as bookkeeper. I continue to keep my funds separate, and when the money comes in from my invoice, even though it comes back proportionately, I am recording the revenue as it should be to match my expense. I'm not sure who wrote that, but maybe you could provide a little insight. So Keith has a little bit more help with that. Joy Duncan. Hi, Joy. Joy, I don't know if you want to speak to that anymore. Or if you can, I don't know if you have the ability to use a microphone. We can come back to it. Dan O'Shea, you're with Keith and Joy. Why is this not a software program issue solution, counterintuitive and lots of work? Why are funds received proportioned? Using Tyler IV as well. Well, as we discussed, Chris gave some insight into why and how that proportionality is working. We have acknowledged and expressed how FY21 is a difficult year to get through. And if your district continues to have difficulties with this, even after this discussion, then those can be other discussions we have with you one-on-one to try to work through whatever it is that you're dealing with, which also may include discussions with your own auditors as well.
Christy, I think you skipped a question from Lucy.
Did I? Lucy, okay. If I transfer from titles 2 and 4 and 5 into title 1, there is a potential of carryover in all 4 funds instead of using all the transfer in funds and only having carryover in title 1. That will require more paperwork on the performance report, won't it? Well, essentially those funds are becoming Title 1 funds. I don't see where that would necessarily create more work. Maybe one of the coordinators can speak to the performance report aspect of that.
Sure, I'll go ahead and speak up a little bit.
Thanks, Dan.
So Lucy, in regards to your question, once you transfer the funds in the application or in the performance report to another title, the performance report and application view those as the title funds in which you transfer to. So if you transfer them all to Title 1, you only have to report on Title 1 funds. So you don't have to report on the carryover funds that were left over or the transferred funds that were left over. It's just all Title 1 at that point. And so you only have to report on one funding source rather than 4 funding sources.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Paula, did you have more questions? You said you might have had a couple on the back burner there. Did you want to ask those now?
My question was on the part that we were talking about when you're doing your actual request for expenditures, where it would be good to be able, when you're asking for $10,400, let's say for Title 1, when you go onto the request screen, you know, I keep it. So I always refer back to that a lot. I would like to see that I'm requesting $10,400 and I see that, yep, I've got it all in the right places versus having to add to the numbers that are already there. So you can actually see what you're requesting per month. I request monthly. It would be good if it kept track of it for you and that you're only seeing on that page what you're doing at that moment.
Right.
It doesn't keep adding, you know, pretty soon you have 10 months of information on that page.
Yes, and we have been in discussion with Chris and Linda about this piece on that expenditures page. That when you do the hover over, you'll be able to see sort of the running record, if you will, and what's in the box is what you are actually requesting in that invoice. Is that what you're saying, Paula?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we have been in discussion with Link about this. So it is on the radar. Chris, I see you've unmuted and it seems like you might will have some input on this.
Yeah, so in the shorter term, we've got something right now. You have something on the hover that basically shows you the budget and how much you've requested and what's remaining. But we do have something coming out hopefully pretty soon that will delineate what's been previously requested from what the new request amount is. I understand it's not exactly like, it's not a zero out beginning every month and just filling in the new, but it will give you, I think, a little more insight into, you know, which of these are new versus old. And then in terms of trying to say, let's just report new, that's something that we would have to work with MDOE on to decide if that was a path we wanted to go down. There's a little more effort on that one. But in the shorter term, the hover data will be delineating previously requested from the current request amount.
Awesome. That is going to be very helpful, it seems. There's quite a few in the chat who have all agreed that that would be a very helpful tool. All right, Lucy, it would make more sense for us to enter the amount we are requesting now and not the total spent year to date. Okay.
I agree.
Yeah. And so that's noted. Chris is here, so he's noting that as well. We will see what we can come up with to try to make as much of this happen as we can to make that easier. All right. Everybody agrees. All right. The chat's just filling with agreement. Awesome. All right.
I have another question.
Yeah, Paula, go for it.
Well, I don't know if it's a question. Maybe it's me not. I like to experiment and maybe I just haven't found it yet or figured it out. If I ask for a reimbursement in the GEM system, if they wanted more information, they would open it back up and I'd have to go and submit something and then I could resubmit. So in Grants for Me, I got asked for a question and I needed to upload some more detail, but it's not letting me upload any more detail. There's not, I click the button and it's just showing me what I already uploaded prior and I can't send the information that they want.
So I'm sorry. You want me to answer this, Christy?
Yeah.
I can guess
yeah.
what there's one of two things. And so I'm looking here. And Paula, you work with Waterville and Winslow
Ambassador.
and Vassalboro. Is this a specific district that this is happening in?
I think it's all of them.
Okay.
Once I've submitted it, it's gone and I can't go edit anything.
Yeah.
But when I get an email that says they need something else, but it's not allowing me to go in there and upload anything else.
So my guess, there's one of two things that I suspect this is. It would be that if they could put a note in the history log asking you to go upload something, but unless they return it back to you, it's not going to be editable. So then if you went to the related documents page, it wouldn't have an upload link, or that related documents page is set up to only allow like a maximum of one document. And if that were the case, and you'd already uploaded something, it would want you to overwrite that. So that's something that, you know, we can talk to Christy and the team about of increasing that count so that you could upload more than one thing. I don't know off the top of my head what it's set to. But my guess is it's either that if they're asking you to upload something, they need to return it not approved back to you, which opens it back up so that you would have the ability to upload,
Agree.
Or the page is set to allow a maximum of one upload for that document and you've already hit that. In which case you would have to replace your upload as opposed to adding new. But I would guess it's one of those two things.
So it looks like something we're gonna have to look into, Paula, to see if it's just a limit on the amount you can actually upload.
So I'm looking, Christy, it doesn't appear to be a limit. Maybe.
No limit, okay.
So it might be that so sometimes like the state could request clarification from you and you might just reply in the history log of that request and you can put comments in the history log without it coming back to you. But to actually upload something that would need to be sent back.
Right,
need
so
to-
I
I
would
need to
essentially,
upload.
go ahead,
It's
Paula.
asking for me to upload an invoice of
Mhm.
24 invoices, and that's why I can't do it. But I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think it's because they haven't sent it back to me to allow me to do that.
Right.
All right, well, it looks like maybe I have not essentially reopened the invoice, which is just denying it and then sending it back to you. So typically my process is this: if I am looking for more documentation, and Paul, this may be something that just happened to you, so I apologize. What I'll do is first I write my comment, I email it to you, I reopen the invoice so that you can essentially, it's not submitted at that point, it's in an editable draft. And so if that does happen, you cannot upload, please let me know. Because like Chris stated, it could have just been that I forgot to open it up for you.
Do you open all of them, Christy? Because I think this one is local entitlement and our local entitlement.
Oh, okay. So for me, I'm just doing the ESDA federal programs. So you would have to reach out to whoever is responsible for that funding. So you would be looking at special services or, what have you, whoever that represents, whoever's processing those invoices for that team would be the one that would have to reopen that for you.
I did reach out, so I'll just wait and see if I get a response. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Keith, you had a question. So go for it. You said it's easier to say than put in the chat.
Yeah, so in the GEM system, if I'm familiar with how it used to work, we were able to ask for reimbursement. And then we could not ask for another reimbursement until one was processed. So, and I'm wondering if I'm understanding Grants for Me, the Grants for Me platform, we can bill for multiple months at once in one lump sum. But yet again, we're held up in that same process. And I understand from the DOE's perspective that there are many auditors that need to consider reimbursement requests. And it can lead to a longer length of time before districts are reimbursed, right? So, so my question is, and maybe this is for Chris or maybe the DOE, why can we not request multiple reimbursements for different months? Like, for example, in January, we haven't been able to request November's reimbursement or December's reimbursement because of our October reimbursement request hasn't been certified, or however you want to tailor that term. So I'm just wondering why that is. Why can we not submit multiple requests until one has been approved?
The short of it is, in case there were ever to be any changes done to your application, to your projects, in case your coordinator, for example, has worked with the regional, with their regional person, and they've moved some things around or changed some things, and perhaps that hasn't been communicated to the business manager, not specifically to your district, but just as a general rule, that we want to be careful that no one would be overspending any of their projects. So that's why that's in place. because we don't want to see anybody get into trouble with their funding. And as far as how many months at a time you can ask for reimbursement, you can do up to 3 months at a time. So if that helps, you can increase that from a month to 3 months. That's acceptable. For FY21, I've actually extended that period just because of the difficulty of that transition for people. I've allowed people to invoice for more time than 3 months to kind of get through 21, just resuming back to the 3-month rule for 22. Does that answer your question, Keith, or help?
So we could, if I combine 3 months of requests into one, and I understand the wait period. I mean, we try and do it monthly, and I think that I heard other folks that are trying to make those requests monthly because, again, from our auditor standpoint, it is nice to see expenses go out in a month and revenue come in for a month to be able to match those. And
Yep.
should there be any questions over a 3-month period, it takes a lot less work to dig into 1 month than it does a 3-month period. So maybe other districts can float that amount of money. I think it makes it difficult depending on how much you're requesting. But it is, I understand the concept.
Yeah.
But being in the director's seat, I'm seeing, 3 months of a request is, I understand the concept. So
yeah, I
thank you.
mean, quite a few districts do the quarterly invoicing, and quite a few do the monthly invoicing. And I guess it would, it would be a bigger deal depending on how much cash on hand your district generally has, right? If your district generally doesn't have that, and really depends on those reimbursements coming in quickly, then frankly, it's something I'd like to know. So I am able to kind of prioritize that as well, because we just certainly don't want districts getting into a situation where they need that cash on hand and it's not happening quick enough. And if I can help that process along a little faster, I want to do that. So you or anybody else who may be facing that same issue, we can kind of talk about it. There's no guarantee, of course, because there are so many districts to process and to look at and to keep the money moving. But we certainly do what we can to work with you to make sure that you don't get into a pickle. So yeah. All right. Understand your staffing problem, but the wait is difficult on smaller districts. I have been stalled out for over a month on billing. Yes, and Sandra is she's from MSCD 46. Sandra's always right on top of things. She's almost like a 3-weeker. She gets her invoices in very, very quickly and very timely. And Sandra, I can see where that would be difficult, and this transition to the new system has kind of slowed some things down, but we are coming into a rhythm. So hopefully that will change moving forward. So and try to get your stuff moving along a little faster is the hope. It's always the hope, really, but thank you for your input. Andrea, do you want to just pop on, Andrea, and speak to your question? You had put something in there.
Yeah, so there just seems to be an incredible lag between the time invoices are approved by someone, the initial approval, and then the amount of time that we're able to submit another invoice, or the amount of time that payment is actually received. Sometimes weeks, sometimes days. So I'm wondering if there's a way of closing that gap. I know in the old system, it seems like an invoice was approved and the next thing you were able to submit a new invoice in the GEM system. And that's not the way that this system seems to be set up.
Definitely hear you. The unfortunate thing that happened after this transition is that our accounting department was hit quite hard with staffing difficulties. And we are seeing a longer turnaround time, not just for processing your invoices, but all the other aspects that they also deal with. So we're talking internally as well. Our team has also had to wait on some things longer than normal. And honestly, it's because they had like 2 people doing everything. So they have hired some people on, so that's good news. And hopefully we're hoping within a month, we're going to start seeing things happen a little bit faster. Unfortunately, that is just not something we have any control over. And we've had discussions with the DAF's department. Our team has, we've been in very close communication with them, and they keep us updated on their staffing. Because we do have people reach out and say, I haven't been paid for this. And we reach out, of course, and say, hey, what's going on with this payment? Has it gone out? So I think everyone is trying the best they can to get these things moved along as quickly as they can. But the world we're in right now is definitely presenting some complications. Short staffing and COVID really does hinder how quickly things are happening.
I completely understand, but it goes back to, I think it was Keith's point, between CRF monies and Easter monies and EA monies and local entitlement, we are fronting a lot of federal money. And some
Yes,
of
you
these
are.
districts do not have the cash flow to hold on to $1 million invoice for months at a time. So it's difficult, and I understand that you're trying. Just know it's a concern for us on our end.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And we are very much aware. And we very much want to see the money head out the door as quickly as possible as well. We certainly don't like holding on to it. So I think that perhaps one thing that could happen if we continue to see time be a problem is that perhaps I could have a threshold that if you go over a certain threshold, then I am communicating with that DAF's department to see if there's any way to move that along faster. But really, they process everything in the order that they come in, just to make it's equality. It's equity for all, so it's equal for everyone. So no district is really getting in there before anyone else. It just is in the order that they come. I certainly can't promise that can happen, but I can try to look into some more solutions for that to try to get things to move faster for you. As we certainly, we hear you. We do. All right. Okay, and someone did just message me in the chat and said it would be helpful if notices went out to the field to let you know of the delays. So that is noted. And we can talk as a team to come up with maybe a system or a process to be able to do that. Definitely. We can look into that for you for sure. All righty. Okay, Holly, you actually bring up a question about backup documentation for your invoices. The old system was random verification. The new system gives you the ability to provide backup documentation. However, it is not going to prevent you from submitting your invoice. So if I, for example, you don't provide that backup documentation, it is not required. And I want backup documentation, I may send it back to you and ask for it. So it might be easier for you to just add the documentation into there, so I'm not reopening it at a later time. Or you can choose to just submit the invoice and I'll look at it and then I'll let you know if I need documentation. Either way works. It's just your preference. All right. Joy. So I'm willing to move everything to Title I since we transferred all of our Title II and Title IV to our school-wide program, as long as you guys promise that you're not going to ask for Title II and Title IV to be broken down at a later date. One fund will definitely save me time. Yes. Don't worry, Joy. That works. Yes. So it looks like our questions are slowing down, and our input is slowing down. Know that all of us have heard your concerns, and we're all here. So all the pieces, all the people are here. So we can further have these discussions to help come up with solutions if possible, and to support you, because all of us have the same goal, which is to provide education to our kids, and to keep our schools going. And so we take what you're saying very seriously. We take what you say into consideration with any decisions that we make. Of course, when you make a decision, it's not always going to work for every single district, and we wish it would. So if today didn't provide enough input to help you, you reach out to us again with new questions, with new input, and we'll continue to work further with you. And we'll try to get through this FY21 as best we can. It is hard, and we acknowledge that it's hard for you. It's hard. That transition's just been difficult. It is a wonderful system. So I'm so glad to see everybody diving into that. Everything is in one place. I think people recognize that piece of it is very helpful, but that 21 has just been kind of a difficult thing to get through and to understand. And we appreciate you all coming today and bringing your thoughts and comments to the table. This is incredibly helpful, not just us, but to all your colleagues out there in the field. And we will be putting together a Q&A for you guys. Hopefully we'll be ready next week. So you'll have that as reference. And one last thing that I am going to ask everybody is to, if you will, provide names of your auditors, because another piece that we'd like to do is to be able to pull auditors together and kind of give them a rundown of the new system, so that you're not having to do that when you're working with them. Okay, so we want to pull that off your plate. So go ahead and just throw those names right in the chat before you leave us today. Would be super appreciated.
I just want to say thank you, Christy, for that, because that was one of the major points that we talked about initially.
Yes.
We are hearing about these things through our clients who may or may not be understanding or may have questions, or, getting some information from the state that doesn't translate well. And so really,
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We honestly didn't realize that was happening. So that's what's great about this new collaboration that we have developed, is that all the people and all the pieces are communicating now, which hopefully will create a well-oiled machine here in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all again for coming. And we can go ahead and stop recording.